Hey everyone, we'd like to try and get you all home and try not to put you to sleep in the meantime because we know we're the last panel. It's been an amazing conference and I'm really excited to share with you some of the work that we're doing in partnership with all the amazing people up here. My name is Raphael Gang. It's coming? Okay. My name is Raphael Gang, and I work at Stand Together Trust as a program officer. We've been engaged with this work around accreditation and how it can support or sometimes hinder the growth of innovative models across the country. I'm going to let everybody on the panel introduce themselves while we get the slides working, and then we'll jump in.
Awesome. My name is Rachel Good. I'm the founder and lead learner at Discovery Learners Academy. We are a micro school in Chattanooga, Tennessee that just went through this next gen accreditation process and were recommended for full accreditation last week.
My name is Walt Rogers. I'm a former state rep from Iowa. And now I lead an organization called Inspire Life, which is a ministry/advocacy group. We're putting parents back in charge of education.
And I'm Christian Talbot. I'm the president of the Middle States Association, one of the 4 major accreditors and the ones that created the next generation accreditation model.
That's great. So we're going to try and do a little, we're going to do something a little more complex than what I feel like I've seen most people do, which is we're going to be kind of tag teaming through this presentation so that everybody can kind of share their part of the story, because it really isn't any one person's part of this. So bear with us as we try and do like a Texas two-step here in terms of stuff. So really the thing that to just center us on, like, what are we trying to accomplish? You know, we want to really have a conversation with everyone in here about what is the current purpose and value of accreditation, where are things kind of headed, and how accreditation is now being used in this new school choice landscape in some ways that people don't fully appreciate, including legislators that we'll talk about. And we want to also share with you some of the work that this crew of people up here has been working on to kind of rethink what's possible in that vein. So we're going to give you a little bit of context, we're going to give you a little bit of story, and we're going to give you a little bit of real life experience from the people that are actually living this, both in the legislature and at the school level, and then kind of tell you where we're headed with it. So the first question that we wanted to just get everyone thinking about as you go through this is, do you think accreditation right now, as you currently understand it, is a good tool for measuring school quality? Just think about that, okay? Because that's basically one of the questions that we're trying to explore here. Oop, let's go back. So, Christian, go for it.
Yeah. Well, first I'll say I'm shocked at how few people are in the room given how often I've heard the word accountability in the last 24 hours. So I guess accountability is good some of the time, but not all the time. What is accreditation? This is a really important place to norm. I think of it as floors and ceilings. So as an accreditor, we try to make sure that there's a good, strong, high floor, which is about affirming that a school meets the standards of accreditation. But more importantly, for my purposes, or my perspective, it's to raise the ceiling and move the walls out to enable innovation. And I don't know that all accreditors necessarily share that point of view, but at Middle States, that's critical to how we think about accreditation. And whether it's us or some other accreditor, accreditation matters whether we like it or not, because many state departments of education are now using it as the gatekeeper for school choice funding. There's this challenge with accreditation that has to do with the kind of irreducible tensions between really 4 major stakeholder groups. So 2 of them probably are in the accountability category, and 2 of them maybe are in a different kind of category. Policymakers and the public do and rightfully expect some degree of quality assurance. And I hope it's not an uncontroversial, or I hope it's not a controversial thing to say that you know, this question of accountability, it's probably not 0 and it's probably not 100%. Like, there's probably something in between those 2 poles. And the challenge, of course, is figuring out where we might land on that question. But policymakers and the public typically look to accreditation to assure some form of quality. families and founders have different needs. And families, of course, as I think we all know, are looking for high quality choices for their kids. And founders need really not only something that enables innovation, but in some cases, like supports just startup. There's a really important question around the work that we do. Again, I can't speak for other accreditors, as not only providing a credential, which is important if you want to access school choice funding, but what we also build into our accreditation model is an implementation framework. We want to help founders to build something, especially if they're coming right out of the classroom or they've never run a business before. It's not obvious necessarily how to structure an entire operating system. Sorry, just go back one slide because, maybe just to put a fine point on it, because we have these 4 different major stakeholder groups and they're looking for different things, there is kind of some irreducible level of tension here, and that friction typically slows innovation.
That's great. So the question to ponder here is, what do you think accreditation is for, and who is it really serving? Right? It's this tool, right? That's what that I think was what Christian is really communicating. So the question is, what do we use that tool for? Who is getting the value out of this tool? That I think is some of the real questions that we have to think really long and hard about when we think about things like accountability to all these different stakeholders that are involved in the process. So everybody's favorite part of any presentation, a history lesson. So what we want to talk through is kind of the genesis of this work and where it started. Like all good things, it started in Iowa.
That's right.
So
Caitlin Clark.
there we go. There we go. Iowa passed their universal education savings account. Oh wait, this is Walt. This is you.
Yep.
This is you. Sorry.
So yeah, I've been in this school choice fight for a long time. Like I said, I was a state rep and really fighting for it when I was there. I got unelected in 2018, and then it was kind of a good thing. I basically went into a organization that helped me promote it all around the state. So that's where Iowa went. But in 2023, we finally passed an ESA. Pretty good bill. Families received the established amount. And so one of the things that Iowa did what was really good is we tied it to our per pupil state cost. And so as of right now, it's $79.88. So one of the things I figured out as a legislator, I was on the Appropriations Committee and the Education Committee. And I started realizing that they just don't do a good job of talking to each other about all the numbers. And all the numbers are kind of fudged in a lot of ways to make their entities look better, especially in education. If you know anything about numbers in education, you can't ever really find out an exact number of how much a state spends. In fact, I have found that, most of the time, even the national organizations, when they say something like, Iowa spends, $13K per year per kid. Well, I did some digging. It's really more like, when I first looked into it, it was more like $18K when I was a legislator. Now, in 2024, we are spending $24K per kid per year. And so our ESA is $8,000. And so there's a big difference there. But why does the establishment, the bureaucracy, kind of hide those numbers? Well, they don't really want parents and the public to really know how much they're spending. So they hide. The biggest thing they hide is bonding. And so, every county, every district is bonding and going into debt, but they never really put that into some of their big numbers. And so when you look at all the expenditures that they do in a whole state, you can find out really what they're spending. And in Iowa, like I said, it's $24K. So that was the impetus of me basically saying we got to do something financially with this system. And once you go into the education system, you realize the bureaucracy is so deep. I mean, it's so deep. I'm going to say it again. It's so deep. I once had a superintendent tell me, well, to fix the bureaucracy in the education system would be like turning 1,000 Titanics around in 1 minute. There's so much there. And I'll talk about that in a little bit as to why. But A good thing we did is we tied our ESA to our state cost per pupil, which they argue about. That's the number they argue about every year. And so when that number goes up, then all the other numbers go up also. And so we've got all students, all grades. We started out in year one as just a means testing, and we had 300% poverty level, and then we went to 400% poverty level, which is actually pretty high when you think about it. And then now, this last year, all students are in the system. The unique thing about ours is it has to be an accredited school, and it is very unique. And then beyond that, the funds can be used. Basically, our ESA, I'm going to tell a little secret. It's really a voucher because the money has to go straight to the school first, which is fine. And then whatever's left, it goes to tuition and fees and that kind of stuff. We have a marketplace middleman, which works it out. Again, if you're a state that's thinking about ESAs, I wouldn't use the marketplace middleman either. Not this. I hope those people aren't in the room, but you don't need them. You don't need a marketplace middleman. Anyway, in my opinion, I'll talk to you later about that if you want to. But a department can handle this stuff. Basically, give the money to the parents and then put the rest in what I call an HSA type of a thing. And like the legislator from Utah said this morning, trust the parent. Anyway, so there's that. But the accredited process, we'll talk a little bit more about. But I think it's a good thing. Now, I say that with a caveat, like I still think parents are the best way to keep anything accountable. And I don't think if you did an ESA, you should have an accredited requirement. But the accredited process is a good thing for the quality of schools. That's still me.
That's you.
So how do legislators view this? A lot of different ways. Legislators, again, I used to be one, so I don't want to bash them too much, but they have to know a little bit about everything. So they know just enough information about, especially education policy, to kind of be dangerous, which is good. But so we have to help them in some of the realistic things. The bureaucratic solution is the question to accountability for sure. The challenges there within that system are hard. The balance of legitimacy within flexibility are unclear with the paths as you're going down and why you want to do accreditation. Why are we doing this? Is it just to fulfill a requirement for our law, or is it really to lift up quality? And so, in my opinion, it's really to lift up quality. Like, for instance, you go to a doctor, obviously you want the plaque on the wall that says, yeah, he finished school, but you're really going there probably because somebody else told you this is a good doctor to go to. Same thing with a mechanic. You're a mechanic. Somebody told you that this is a good mechanic to go to. So the accreditation papers basically says, yeah, they have done the foundational things to meet the requirements, but you really are going to other parents going, is this a good school? Do we want to go to this school? Why do I want to send my kids there? And so in one sense, the accreditation process, I believe, is a good thing. In Iowa, Christian may go over this, but just some of the basics. An accreditation school has to have a clear philosophy, qualified staff, defined curriculum. There's several site visits, yearly visits. Iowa specific law, they have to have 180 days and 1,080 hours. They have to keep track of really good of their financial records. They have to secure student records. They have to have secure student records. Safe facilities, continuous improvement with their mission. These are all just kind of the basics that the school has to have. So as a parent, if I know they're accredited, I'm going, that's at least a foundational quality level that I can trust. And so that part I like. This is the piece that I show when I show why legislators do the things they do. When I left being the chair of education, I went to an organization that we were just analyzing the bureaucracy. And I had one of my guys on my staff say, go into the Iowa system and find out where the money goes, what funds it actually goes to, and then where it ends up. And he was doing this for like 2 months. And he came back to me and said, Walt, I can't do it anymore. This is the best. And this is actually real. This shows there's 3 different sources, your state, your federal, and your local funding. where they come through and like what revenue source that is supposed to go to. And then it goes to what fund did the education establishment design for that money to go into? And then out of that fund, where do those expenditures go? And he actually talked to many people in the Iowa Department of Ed many times, and there were people there that said, I'm not even sure anybody in this office knows exactly where all the money goes and where it comes from. It's kind of scary to think about. And so that's really only about a tenth of the reality of where all the money comes from and where it all goes. And here's what legislators do. They don't get into that, but they go, see that one little line? That little green line that goes from the top and the bottom? That was me. I voted for that. And then the next legislator comes in 2 years later and go, that was me. I voted for that one. And this goes on for 30, 40 years. The legislators come in like, I voted for that. That's what I did to fix education. And then we have this bureaucratic conglomerated mess that we can't change. Because, I mean, it's just the bureaucracy has taken over. And so I show that just to give you a perspective of why legislators do what they do. They're trying to keep their job. But two, they're stuck in this bureaucratic system that doesn't change. And Thomas Jefferson said a little revolution is good every now and then. I think states should just overhaul their whole system and start over, to tell you the truth. So, last but not least, is accreditation needed? I still believe accreditation is good, but the bottom line goes to the parents. Like the parents having the purse strings is the best accountability. It just is. And so they figure out what's best for their child. They listen to all the Yelp reviews. They talk to other parents. And if they can go stand up and take their money elsewhere, that's going to keep the school accountable. The previous panel we were in here and talking about, is it really working? In Iowa, it's working. I know for a fact I've had government school administrators come to us and our staff and say, now that this Christian school is in our town, we have to be better at what we do. And so the process, I believe, the competition process is good for schools. Accreditation is good for a school to show parents that they are at least meeting this quality line of education.
So just to give a little bit more context, Iowa passed this massive ESA voucher program in 2023, and we were really excited about it at Stand Together. And so I started talking to some folks that were working on it, including the marketplace administrator, and I asked them, like, what are you seeing kind of in Iowa? Like, what's happening there? And he said, we don't have enough schools. And I said, you don't have enough schools? What do you mean you don't have enough schools? And he says, we don't have enough schools. And he said that 42 of the 99 counties in Iowa do not have an accredited private school. So 42 counties in the state basically have no option that families can access using the ESA program. And the challenge was that, well, the timeline for those schools to get accredited is minimum, in most cases, 12 to 18 months. And that is after a school has opened their doors. So there was no way for schools to get accredited before they opened their doors. So in that situation, inadvertently, as Walt kind of eloquently put there, right, legislators with good intentions of ensuring kind of this baseline floor of quality had essentially cut off access to the program for anybody new that wanted to launch a school in Iowa, because it's kind of a chicken or the egg. You had to open in order to get accreditation, but if you wanted to serve a community that couldn't afford or wouldn't be able to afford the full tuition cost of your school, you couldn't really open. And so we really were...
Can I just jump in and say, you have 12 to 18 months, and that might be true in Iowa, but in Tennessee and in several other states, the options for accreditation, of course, are chosen by the Department of Ed. And in a lot of them, you have to be open 3 years before they'll even take your application. So 3 years plus 12 to 18 months in my case, for instance.
My apologies.
No,
I mean, no. It's like, but like, I think this speaks to kind of like well-intentioned legislation that had very undesirable consequences. I don't think if you asked any of the legislators that passed the ESA law, they were like, we don't want any new schools coming into Iowa. right? I doubt that that's what they were saying. So we built a partnership with Middle States and several other accreditors in the Iowa Association of Christian Schools to see if we could, at the very minimum, speed up that process. So we didn't really change anything in that process, but we just said, if you're a private school and you're not accredited in Iowa, or if you're even launching as a private school in Iowa, come join us in this process. See if you can go through the thing, and we'll create modules that'll help you kind of go through it. It'll be a little bit more independent study than kind of the typical process was at the time. And we were able to work with a bunch of new schools. 14 schools in 6 months basically were able to get accredited through this process, which may not sound like a lot, but again, relative to the baseline, we're doing better, right? And so we were really excited about that. But we, I think, really fundamentally believed there was an opportunity to do something much more dramatic and much bigger. And so Christian and I eventually connected with each other more directly. And I'm excited for him to share more about, and Christian, you just got to press the green button here to walk you through kind of some of the more, some of the specifics of what we built.
Yeah, it's probably worth sharing the anecdote about how we connected. I was on a panel at ASU GSV about enabling innovative school models. And I said, listen, as an accreditor, I will confess that accreditation is often a mechanism or the mechanism that preserves the status quo. It might be incremental improvement on the status quo, but it's often still a preservation of an existing paradigm that in many cases doesn't work. So I said, we are or have been part of the problem, and that catalyzed our conversation.
It's me, I'm the problem.
Well, it's more like the call is coming from inside the house, maybe is a better way to put it. Oops.
There you go.
We've already basically named the different kinds of problems here. It takes too long to get accredited. It's too expensive, both in direct costs as well as indirect costs. The amount of time that a founder has to spend filling out documents, to say nothing of coordination of lots of different stakeholders. And if you're a pre-launch school, previously it really just was not an option. So, together with a task force, and some of those people are in the room, and I'm thrilled that they're here with us. We designed a new form of accreditation. We call it next generation accreditation, but we started with these 3 design principles. It's got to be faster, it's got to be cheaper, and it has to be nimbler. And here, like the word nimble means more responsive to the designs of innovative school models. Just last night, I was talking with someone who is a school founder, and it's a forest school. They don't have a building. And she said she has had the hardest time over the last few years trying to convince her accreditor, which is not us, that they don't have a physical building to which their students go. And I said, well, that shouldn't be a problem. Like, we don't need a certificate of occupancy. We need to know what your learning environment is, and you need to describe your learning environment, and of course, follow whatever the local and state laws are about, safety in that environment. But there's nothing kind of like, there's not like platonic form of school that descended from the sky and said you must have a building. So that's part of what nimbler here means. And the process itself for designing, as I said, there's a task team representing a lot of different points of view, which was really helpful. And we went through multiple drafts. The goal that we're working through right now is this pilot program. We have 53 schools in the pilot. Talk more about that in a minute. We are not aiming for perfection. Done is better than perfect, and we're going to keep evolving rapidly while maintaining standards. And this is really interesting because I know the word standard or standards can be triggering a little bit in the way that the phrase status quo is triggering for me. And I have to say, it's really impressive to me that we designed something that uses literally word for word our existing standards of accreditation. We didn't change a single word in that document, but what we changed was the accreditation protocol, so the types of evidence that are permissible. We also, as I said earlier, designed it partly as an implementation framework, and so asking schools to do a one-page business model. That's not something that we ask for our traditional schools to do. But if you're a founder We want you to have the confidence that you actually understand the value proposition of your school and that you can sketch it out on one page, because not only is that good for your own business operation, but from a marketing standpoint, it allows you to talk really quickly and clearly to prospective families about who you are, what problem you're solving for kids, and how you do it. You want to talk about the
Sure.
EdNext article?
Yeah, so in a perfectly timed coincidence, we were actually able to publish an article in partnership with Michael Horn in Education Next. Shout out, Education Next. And it just came out actually a day or two online, so you should be able to find it. But this lovely chart I stole from the thing, and this is all information that Christian provided, and I'd love for you to talk through it. But essentially, this is a comparison of what's the status quo and how we were able to shift just by, again, doing this thing where we focused on process, not even changing the standards at all in what we did. So I think a lot of times people think that innovation has to be this like radical change in, the values and all these things. And oftentimes I think that. I think what's really interesting about this and what I think Christian pointed to there is we just talked about process. We just said, do you really need to check that box, that specific box? Or are there other ways that people can demonstrate that they can do that? And just by doing that, this is what we were able to accomplish a lot.
Yeah, and I encourage you to read the article. It's a great article, but the headline basically is the new process is either 2/3 or 3/4 cheaper and faster, right? And that's what matters. And the nimbler part I've already spoken to, but maybe a shout out to one of my commissioners, Susanna Hemsby, who was on this task team. So for our purposes, very much a non-governmental organization, but operating kind of with similar governance speed. I need to include commissioners because I don't choose my commissioners. They're elected to serve and to make accreditation decisions. Even as the CEO of the nonprofit, I don't make any accreditation decisions. I'm not allowed to. Only the commissions can do that, right? So we included some commissioners, and Susanna talking about who we want middle states to be. She said, I want us to be a catamaran, not a cruise liner, right? And certainly not 1,000 cruise liners trying to turn them around in 1 minute. But the pilot has had well over 150 inquiries with virtually zero marketing. I mean, really, we didn't market it at all. It was a lot of word of mouth. As I said, we admitted 53 schools from 15 different states. 5 of them either were not open at the time of application or still are not yet open, but they will be accredited, presuming that they have a clean accreditation visit and they're recommended for accreditation. Then the commissions should have no problem voting in favor of that accreditation. And then 48 already in operation. So really exciting, and 15 of those 53 will be accredited, or they'll be put. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but they'll be put forward for an accreditation decision in the middle of this November. So the time to an accreditation decision, from the point of inquiry to you are now officially accredited, is for those 15 schools less than 6 months.
And can I just say before you go on, the chart you just had up, and you don't have to go back to it, but you were generous to the other options, because as a founder, looking at like the logistics of it, I would have had to hire somebody full-time to meet those requirements, and also the price point for what those accreditations were not on my options. So, I was looking at $60,000 plus to be accredited by the time I paid somebody full-time for a year to do it. So for you guys to bring this option has really been a huge game changer for us.
I'm thrilled to hear that for lots of reasons, but primarily because, the word accreditor, the word accreditation, I think evokes probably justifiably bureaucracy, technocracy. We are very invested in having personal relationships. Like, this is the first time meeting Rachel in person for me, but she has had a great relationship with Adam LaValle, who's our person who leads this work. And when you listen to her story in a minute, you will understand why we care so deeply about enabling this form of innovation. But the last thing I'll say, is that from here, actually, I don't know if that slide comes later, actually, maybe. yeah, I think about what's next. So I'll just pass it down because I want to hear from Rachel.
Oh, yeah.
So just the big green button.
The big one up top. Hi. So yes, I run a school, so I get to do the direct work with the kids, the fun stuff, right? That these guys make possible. So I run this micro school in Chattanooga, Tennessee. We planned to start with 8 kids, and we had 21 kids on day 1. And we were like, whoa, okay, there's a need, because we were brand new. This was 4 years ago. But parents were desperate enough, quite frankly, to be willing to try it because their kids were miserable. And there was a variety of reasons. About 50% of our kids are neurodiverse. But regardless, we really wanted to take a child-first approach. And we wanted kids to be counted as humans. And we wanted there to be a community feel to our learning. And like so many of you guys and so many of the people we've heard from during this conference, we knew, and we brought in a team of educators, we knew what we wanted to give kids. We knew with their families and from them what they needed. And we suddenly had the ability to adapt and pivot as needed, because we certainly don't know everything. But we just are able to adjust to their needs, and we're not so stuck, or even, let's just say stuck, as a traditional model that we can say, oh, that's not working? Okay, then let's make a change. And we can do that really rapidly. And we saw this, our kids blossoming. And of course, we have very small numbers. We're micro school, 21 kids. In Tennessee, you have to take a standardized nationally normed test every year to be a private school. And so we were doing that with our 3rd through 8th graders, but our sample size was small. And given those caveats, as it turns out, when you let them be kids and you teach them about themselves and their feelings, and let them have a full human experience at school, and when you would tailor academics to where they are regardless of their age, and when you apply their interest, they learn. People talk to me and they're like, but what about your academics, Rachel? And I'm like, we will get to that, I promise. And our kids make on average 1.5 to 2.5 years of growth in the key academic areas. So and these are kids who were not making a year's growth in a traditional setting, and they're making more than a year's growth. We also have kids who come to us ahead of grade level, and they make more than a year's growth. So it works, but it works for other reasons. But then comes the funding, right? I came from working in public schools. 98% free and reduced lunch was the school I was teaching at before I started DLA. And I really deeply wanted those families to have access to this, because those kids need it too. And yet they can't all afford to pay tuition, and I have to pay my staff, and I have to pay rent, and that kind of thing. So we have 70 kids now and 8 staff. And we charge tuition that's well below the average in our city, and well below what our local school district spends per child. And I still have to fundraise the difference, and which comes down to a sustainability issue. So accreditation came to us. Actually, Dawn from the National Microschooling Center called me, because I'm always trying to figure out, how do I get money in the hands of these families so they can afford what they need? And so I do my fundraising piece, but I also want to, teach the kids and be with the kids and run the school. And so Dawn called and said, Rachel, I've been talking to Stand Together and to Middle States, and they're going to do a micro school accreditation. Are you interested? And I was like, yes, where's the form? And he was like, just, if you could fill out in the next 2 weeks. And I was like, yep, so I will turn it in tonight. And I think I did. But I was like, I am jumping on this, because if this gives parents access, and Tennessee was in the ESA process, we didn't know what was going to get passed, but the ESA law that we currently have does include the requirement for accreditation. So this gave us, a way to be involved. And in terms of the timeline, really the timeline was hugely helpful. It was really short. It was still a lot of time, because as you guys know, oh yeah, I had that before you had that cool calendar that we didn't need this for. But anyway, we started in May, and in November we'll be fully accredited, but we've already been approved for recommended for accreditation. So that's helpful. That means next school year we can accept vouchers or ESA funds. But really the other 2 pieces that we found deeply valuable in this process were, one, there were some business pieces that I was missing, and we're 4 years in, y'all. Like, they were not pieces that were directly impacting the kids. We didn't have any issues with transparency in our financial records, but I'm an educator, And so there were some business pieces that, as we worked through this process with Adam, I was like, oh, if I put that in writing, like I was actually doing most of it, but if I get hit by a bus, then nobody else knows to do it. Quite frankly, and Adam said, no, what if you win the lottery? I said, no, if I win the lottery, I'll still be there. But if I get hit by a bus, we're in trouble. So we formalized that, and I think that's really valuable, that we have a lot of business and programmatic pieces now documented so that, somebody besides me can do it. The other piece that we found to be really valuable was just the collaboration. So when I thought accreditation, like I said, we were looking at thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that we didn't have. And these people are very formal, and they're like coming in and they're kind of like, what is this? What are you guys? And so to be able to work with Adam, and from day one, when I did the candidacy application or the candidacy call, so collaborative and so wanting to understand. At our micro school and so many micro schools, curiosity is really one of our key tenets and the foundation of all our approach. And it's curiosity because that allows learning. If you think you already know everything, then there's no learning to happen. And yet, in most accreditation situations and people I had talked to, they already knew everything. They were just coming to tell me that I didn't. And it was so nice to have this conversation with them around, where he was like, tell me about micro schools. Tell me what it's like to run a micro school. And Adam's run schools. But I think he was really curious. If not, he's a really good actor. But there was a lot of give and take. And throughout the process, when I had questions, he was like, just call me. Just ask. And it wasn't a gotcha. So I was like, I don't even know what you mean by this question. And I feel like to most people deciding whether or not I can accept state funds, that would have been like, I don't want them to know I don't know what I'm doing. But, I felt very confident to ask him. And then he was like this. And I was like, oh, I have that. I just didn't know what you were calling it. So anyway, it's been a really encouraging process. Absolutely, there are some pieces that felt like they took some time and they weren't necessarily super helpful, but the state wants them. And, in my opinion, you guys are acting largely as a bridge between what the state has known and understands and this very new thing that's scary to legislators. And, if that means that I have to do a little bit of extra hoop jumping, but I can do it. What? Translating. Thank you. That's nicer. It was well worth it. So it's anybody that's running a school that's looking at it, I highly, highly encourage you to do it. I think you will find a lot of value in it. It's very, very affordable, even for a tiny school that's always fundraising. And I think that you will find the time well spent.
And Christian, I accidentally deleted the slide, but could you share a little bit about what's next for NGA?
Yeah, I guess there were a few bullet points on it, but the one that I'm the most excited about is I have initiated conversations with other accreditors to what we want is a coalition of accreditors, that this is not a middle states thing. This should be a rising tide for all boats. So I've already had conversations with a few who are very excited and have already spoken with Raphael, and that to me, that's going to build another part of this movement.
That's great. So I'm going to try and follow Daniel's recommendations, and we'll leave time for questions. Let's go. Yeah. Oh, wait. Try and for the virtual folks.
Just a quick comment. I'm from Oklahoma, and this has been transformational in our state. I know our private school accrediting council has worked really well with the accreditors in our state to get up to speed so that families and schools can take advantage of our school choice program. And I know Middle States has been a big part of that. And so I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. You, sir, back there. I'm going to go back to this slide where we kind of give the rundown.
So context, I'm from Texas. We're launching our first DSA program. And I'm happy to hear about the redesign, but the scale's still quite small, especially when you consider the supply side needs of a state like Texas launching this program. The pace of innovation, particularly with micro schools, is moving faster than accreditation cycles. We know that's also true. So what would it take to get hundreds or even thousands of schools in time to make a real supply side difference in a state like Texas on this timeline?
Yeah, I mean, first I would say congratulations and condolences on launching your new ESA program. It's a lot of work. Christian, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the requirement to be open for 2 years is incredibly challenging for the state of Texas, right? So any school that wants to be pre-launch, which we're great with as an accreditor, just can't do it in Texas. But putting that question aside, part of why I want a coalition of accreditors is because middle states cannot possibly handle all of the volume that theoretically could come, to the one accreditor right now. Maybe there's 2 of us that are doing something innovative. So unless there's more enablement in the wider system, right? It's not just a supply-demand issue. As Rachel said, we're a bridge, we're a translator, we're maybe like a traffic cop almost. We need more kind of people in the accreditation game to allow for that kind of throughput. And what Raphael and I have talked about a lot, and Don and I have talked about, and Eric and I have talked about is we need design principles. So faster, cheaper, nimbler for me are non-negotiables. I'm not interested in aligning in a coalition with somebody who wants to do the status quo just a little bit better. So I know it's still part of a kind of an emerging solution.
Can I ask a quick question to you? So Texas has an accreditation requirement. Was there much discussion on that during the process?
It was a non-negotiable. That's to get across the finish line. Homeschool families can qualify for $2,000, but if you want to qualify for the private school money, which is between $10,500 to $12,000 on average, because it's going to also like Iowa flow depending on how much that gets from the state.
Yep.
Then you have to be accredited to qualify for that large amount, which seems to be the more sustainable approach, especially for micro.
It's just interesting that, we've got different models out there. Some states don't require the accreditation, some do, but, these ones that are having trouble getting it over the finish line have to stick that in, and I wish they didn't have to, but
Yeah.
you know where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and I would encourage everyone to go to Education Next, read this article. We highlight some of the different approaches that other states have taken as opposed to accreditation as well, because it's great that we have Christian here and doing the work that he's doing, but like we said, we now need to talk to a lot of other accreditors so that we can open up the spigot essentially so that more and more schools can come online and serve. There's a great report that came out from Step Up for Students in Florida, and Florida does not have an accreditation requirement. And they said that last year, I think, or like a couple of years ago, if Ron is here, he'll correct me, but he might not be. I think it was like 40,000 kids got the scholarship, got the voucher or the ESA in Florida, but did not end up accepting it. And the main reason why that happened is that they couldn't find a school. Like, supply has now become the problem in states that have these programs. And so if you're implementing rules around accreditation or 2 years, you need to be open in order to get access to the programs, you're going to create a bottleneck. Like, it's kind of inevitable in my mind.
So who are these accreditors, and what does it take to become an accreditor? Can my organization be an accreditor? Who blesses, who benights? Or does anyone benight the accreditors as an accreditor?
Yes, great question. There are 4 major accreditors in the U.S., but there are a ton of small accreditors. They're often based on some form of identity. Could be religious, it could be a particular learning model, like Montessori, or classical learning. But in any event, the 4 major accreditors, we've just frankly been around the longest. So, Middle States is the second oldest accreditor in the world. 1887.
Can I just call? Can I decide we want to do school accreditation?
You get recognized at the state level. Yeah, you get recognized by each state Department of Education, and once you're recognized as an accreditor, then you're authorized to operate in the state.
So what happens is, like, Iowa Department of Ed puts the onus on the accreditors, so they have to, go through their process. Iowa uses 9 different accreditors, but again, there's probably 3 or 4 that they use primarily. But it's on the onus of the accreditor to do their job, and if they don't do their job, then they lose that affirmation from the state.
So there's an application, we have to apply and get approved by the State
Department of Education?
Yeah.
Because we've called several states' departments of education, and they say they know about accreditation for higher ed, but they don't oversee accreditation for K-12.
So it is a little, speaking as a former State Department of Education employee, you'd be shocked at what we don't know about what we do at the state level.
I wouldn't.
Speaking, Walt's slide with all the funding sources and how convoluted it is, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. That's great. But I think every state approaches it a little bit differently. So like in Texas, there is, my understanding is in Texas, there is an a nonprofit organization that is the Texas.
TEPSAC, yeah.
Texas.
It's a private school.
Yeah.
It's a private school association's kind of coalition of accreditors.
Right. So, and the state, there's basically a law on the books in Texas that outsources that function of approving accreditors, what a mouthful, to TEPSAC, essentially.
But let me clarify. Also written into the bill, on top of TEPSAC as the group of certified accreditors, the state agency, TEA, has the power to identify additional new accreditors outside of the TEPSAC group if they choose.
Right.
So there is, to your point, if somebody wants to stand up a new micro school accreditation that works faster, more nimble, et cetera, to compete with maybe some of the older ones, it's potential for the market in Texas.
Yeah, but each state does it a little bit differently. It's decentralized, and different states have histories with it, right? Like Texas and Iowa have long histories across the state of accreditation being a core part of their private school landscape. Florida and Arizona do not. And so their state laws reflect that. And so it really is a state-by-state thing. So if you look at how each state approaches it broadly, a lot of times, that slide where Walt was talking about like the legacy, right? If you have a statewide legacy with your private schools of accreditation just being generally required to be an approved private school, a lot of times what we're seeing is those states, when they enact ESA or voucher programs, they are just saying, yeah, you need to have that accreditation. But if you don't have that history, like Florida, Arizona, and some other states, you're much less likely to add that to the statutes and add that to the system. So it's every state's history, and it matters a lot, at least in the politics side of things. Next question. Ashna.
Hi. Rachel, I was curious from you, this process of pursuing the accreditation and now being approved, do you feel like beyond being able to access ESA funding in Iowa, do you feel like it's made a difference with families who are looking at your school or teachers, guides?
Yeah, great question. So yes and no. No, not yet, because we don't even have the official stamp yet, and we still have 70 kids. What I found is largely families that want really innovative ed don't care about accreditation, because accreditation is a mark of standardization to some level. Now, I do anticipate once we have it, there'll be some families that matters to, for sure. I don't anticipate it being an overwhelming number. As far as staff, no, it hasn't been an issue either way. So aside from getting the funds, I think the key value for us of the accreditation, and it took approximately 40 hours. Obviously, we didn't do that in 1 week, but it was about 40 hours of concentrated work to get it across that line, which is doable, even wearing as many hats as founders wear. The biggest benefit, aside from access to the funding, is the documentation, and that it being sustainable for somebody else to run. And also, in worst case scenario, it's nice to have the documentation to prove you were doing what you needed to be doing.
Next question. Ma'am, in the blue, I saw your hand was up.
Thank you. I'm Deb Bell and AIM Academy Online. We were accredited by Middle States 2 years ago. So a comment, we've doubled in size since then. What really surprised me was the value that our parents saw, and it brought families to us who were not even, inquiring because of that. And for our teachers, almost all of whom are not traditionally credentialed, it was really a stamp of professionalism and validation for what they're doing, so they value it because it makes them feel like they have really beefed up their resume. So I guess my question is, Christian and Stand Together Trust, have you seen that? Like accreditation really is a path for sustainability and growth and durability for the, I'm a learning services provider, I'm not a school, for some of these alternatives that are being accredited.
Yeah, Christian.
Well, it's too early to say whether it is a path, but the bet that we're making, if we're in the casino, the bet we're placing is that it absolutely will be, partly for the reasons that Rachel's already articulated. One of the values of accreditation is that it provides this full operating model that you want to be able to hand to somebody else and they can run it too. So there's sustainability in that. I mean, we might call that succession planning in another context, but even more than that, for the kinds of micro schools that want to be around for many, many years, as opposed to just a few years, which is its own kind of subsegment. We've designed this model. Again, the business model campus is a good example of this. We've designed this model to really equip the founder with the kinds of essentials, like not the bells and whistles, not like everything you could possibly want to see in an accreditation, but like what are the most important things? Another thing is a declaration of powerful learning, just a one-page document about how your school describes and defines powerful learning, but it's got to be grounded in student purpose, student agency, and skills and knowledge and disposition. So that also can become a marketing asset. And you can't be sustainable if you're not marketing yourself coherently and clearly. So it's too early to tell. I don't know, Raphael, if you have a different angle on it.
I think part of the challenge here is that every school is different, right? We're seeing such an incredible diversity of models emerge because of these policies, and then just because the general energy in the space of people like you and Rachel and all these folks that we see building things. And so I think there's kind of a general set of reasons we hear schools want accreditation. Sometimes it's for the ESA funding. Sometimes it's because they do want that kind of stamp of approval that says to families, like, I can trust this. Sometimes it's because the state just requires it. Like Iowa just, if you want to be a private school in Iowa, you need to do it. And some states do have those kinds of rules on the book. So everyone is different. And some schools really do value that kind of feedback and support and how it helps them be the best version of themselves. So I think if you ask, 50 schools and you said, give me the percentage reason for of all four of those reasons why you're doing this, I think you'd get 25, 30, 40 different variations of like, what is the primary thing that they care about in that process. I think that's fine. But I think when it comes to policymakers thinking about what are we trying to accomplish with this, I think they should exercise caution, because if something is being used in that kind of accountability framework where it's like, you got to do this in order to get access to ESA funding, that really has implications for how schools run, especially if those frameworks have not been updated in 50 years, right? If those systems have not been updated in 50 years and it costs $60,000 for someone to get accredited. So I think legislators, when they pass these programs, they're balancing a lot of concerns. I would just encourage them to understand this little niche of the world that you can't find on the websites, and be careful about it, because it really has implications for people like Rachel, and I'm sure you. Michael, are we at time, or do we have time for one more question? Oh, we have 5 more minutes. Oh, man, that's amazing. Sir, yeah.
So thank you for great conversation and all of the work around this NGA, which seems really, really promising, and like it satisfies a number of needs. Christian, it makes me a little worried about your business model, because as it becomes better known and more accessible, I mean, who would choose the other one?
Shh, don't
really
say this.
I mean, and maybe there are reasons why people would, but I'm guessing all the founders in the room would say, well, yeah, not me. And so is there a future where middle states could run on this model if that was the dominant one?
It's such a great question, and it brings me back to a conversation that I had with a micro school network leader about 1.5 years ago. We were talking about the costs of traditional accreditation. So this was before next generation accreditation was even a thought. Well, it was a thought, but it certainly wasn't in motion. And he was talking about an accreditor that didn't want to change what they were doing, because they said, well, we'll just end up cannibalizing our own customer base. Because if we do something that's faster and cheaper, then we lose money, basically. And I was, maybe this says more about me than the process, but I was shocked that the response wasn't, yeah, it's actually incumbent on us as the accreditor to evolve our business model. We should not be assuming that because states are that many states are forcing this into legislation, that we can just sit on our laurels and assume like, oh, you know, they're going to have to come to us no matter what. So like we can just do whatever we want. Or not change what we're doing. Maybe I think that's a better way of putting it. Not updating frameworks because there's no pressure on us to do that. So in some ways, I see it as a very positive pressure for us to update our business model. Yes, we will be around for another 140 years, and I'm sure that this will evolve very rapidly over the next few years. But that's part of the work that we have to do. Like we can't just put all the work on the schools or the legislatures.
I would also say, I mean, part of what inspired me in the thinking and a lot of our conversations with Christian and the team has been about what's happening in higher ed accreditation. So if you haven't been following that, it's kind of fascinating to view the kind of divergent paths that the world is going on. K-12 education is now like loving accreditation and adding it to all these laws. In higher ed, you know, the administration and a lot of states are pushing in a very different direction, is what I will say. And there's, so I think it is, I appreciate Christian's willingness to be kind of a leader in this process. But I would say that if we did not do this project and we were not seeing more innovation in the K-12 accreditation space, I would be shocked if in a few years you didn't see legislative changes come from state capitals around this. Like the pressure that's going to be on Texas, the pressure that was going to happen in Iowa and a few of these other states around supply and how families can't find schools because of somewhat arbitrary rules that have been enacted, I think that was going to create a politically untenable situation at some point. And that's not a place that I think any accreditor wants to find themselves in. One last question, Michael? Yeah, there we go. Who wants the last question? Ma'am over there. Go, Michael, go.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Allie Ronder, and I'm from Texas also. And I've been working in this realm for the last 20 years. I started out as a public school educator, and then a public charter educator, and then administrator, and then a small school, private school, homeschool, hybrid educator and administrator. I've been a founder of a few different schools and then launched with network of small schools in Austin, Texas, the Education Transformation Alliance, which was designed to help create access and awareness to educational choice in the Central Texas area. That allowed me to work with a number of small schools way before the term micro school was in our vernacular, but they were micro schools. My cohorts and I then founded the iCare, which is an accreditation entity, and we worked with Drs. Josette and Ba Lovemore from the Summa Institute and the Summa Academy to develop a relationship-based, focused accreditation process. And this was specifically because we didn't want to be responsible for undoing any of the amazing and innovative and unique things that were at each school. We wanted to be affordable and available to all of the micro schools, because as you know, it takes a lot of manpower, and usually the director is also a teacher, is also the counselor, is also the lifeguard, you know? And so there's not a lot of manpower to go around. When parents would come to me as a head of school and say, is your school accredited? I would just simply ask, which accrediting agency would you most prefer or feel most comfortable with us working with? And they didn't know.
Right.
They had no idea what accreditation meant, what the process was. They just knew that it was something that you're supposed to have, right? Like a Better Business Bureau sticker on your website. So we spent 10 years developing and working, trying to put this accreditation tool together, beta testing it at a number of schools. Every director said that it helped them find those blind spots that they didn't even know they had, put together all of their succession plan materials, and if they were going to get hit by a bus, they'd have that together. But the one thing that I didn't hear today, and I'm so thankful to see this on the agenda, was the role that the accreditation that in Texas is going to play for the ESAs What role will that have for the teachers who choose to work in these alternative schools that forego participation in the Texas retirement system? We've got dedicated educators that can spend decades in these schools that aren't earning toward their retirement, and they're sacrificing their retirement to be in these innovative schools that really address the student needs. So I'm curious to know what middle schools Middle States has done, or what models may exist as we're forming what we're doing in Texas that we could learn from and co-opt in the evolution of how we're rolling out ESAs in Texas to support teachers being able to participate in TRS.
Okay, that is a very specific question, and we are way over time now. Christian, can you give like a 30-second answer on that?
I don't have an answer because accreditation doesn't govern that particular issue. I think that's a legislative issue.
Yeah.
Right?
It's something we've discussed. It's a tough one it's a tough cookie. Teacher unions are not going to let us go into their retirement and let it transfer. I'd love to see that happen, but that's a tough one.
Okay, and thank you, everyone. If you'd like to learn more about this, again, the article is in Education Next. Just Google Education Next accreditation and my name. It'll be the first one pop up if you want to learn a little bit more about this. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you all.
About micro school accreditation.